Chapter 1. Echoes Through Stone. The wind over Vale Rindor carried a sharpness it hadn't known in decades. It cut through the trees, whistled through the estate's courtyard, and stirred the cloaks of elven soldiers gathered beneath banners bearing the sigil of the Guardian Council. At the centre of it all stood the stone archway, ancient, vine-wrapped and humming with spent magic. The portal had awakened, and someone had stepped through. Aeliana dismounted in silence. Behind him, Aeliana followed, her movements practiced and precise. She wore the mantle of a senior apprentice with quiet pride, her keen eyes scanning every ward, every residual rune still pulsing faintly along the ground. A few paces behind her walked Lyra, the newest addition to the council's ranks, younger, sharper-edged, her posture rigid but defiant. She was watching everything, saying nothing, her mind clearly running faster than her feet. The estate's master waited near the sealed threshold. Lord Vale Rindor, once a decorated statesman, now pale with restrained fury. "I summoned the council the moment I read the letter," he said without preamble. "The portal, this portal, was not authorized. My son had no right to activate it." Aeliana's gaze swept the portal's frame, and yet he did. "He left in the night," Vale Rindor added. "Without clearance, without escort. He used something that hasn't functioned in decades and vanished into the unknown." Aeliana crouched, brushing fingers over the base glyphs. "Restored cleanly. And recently?" Aeliana nodded. "It wasn't random tampering. He knew what he was doing." "That's impossible," the nobleman snapped. "He's just a boy, a dreamer. He should be—" Aeliana turned sharply. "Should be sitting in council chambers reciting diplomatic theory? Perhaps. But he isn't." The silence that followed was colder than the wind. Lyra, quiet until now, glanced up from the runes. He wasn't guessing. Whoever did this, they studied. This portal was stabilized by instinct or understanding. Aeliana looked to Aeliana. "What now?" "We find the one who trained him," he said, "because whoever awakened this portal has begun walking paths we've long feared would reopen." He turned to the Lord. "You said he left a letter, one for his master?" Vale Rindor hesitated. "Yes, Maran, a scholar of minor repute." Aeliana's eyes narrowed, a flicker of familiarity surfacing. "Then, I know where to go." Aeliana stood before the ancient archway, the last traces of its power still whispering through the runes. The wind tugged at his cloak, but he barely noticed. His attention was on the feel of the ley-line current beneath the earth, disrupted, but not shattered, like a bell still ringing long after the strike. He turned to Aeliana. "You'll stay." She blinked, surprised, but recovered quickly. "Yes, Master." "Study the portal, runes, flow, residual energy. I want a full diagnostic and magical trace. If he left a signature, I want to know what it was." Her hand moved instinctively toward her satchel of scribing tools. "I'll begin immediately." "Lyra," Aeliana added, turning toward the younger apprentice. The girl straightened. "You will assist her. No deviations, no shortcuts, and no wandering off. This is a delicate construct. If any piece is unstable—" "I understand," Lyra said quickly, though her eyes flicked back to the portal with something unreadable in them. Aeliana studied her for a breath longer, then nodded. This portal was activated in defiance of law, but not recklessly. Someone taught him. Someone who knew enough to reawaken what should have stayed dormant. "I'll speak with the one who received that letter." Lord Vale Rindor stiffened. "You know him?" "Once," Aeliana murmured, eyes distant. "And perhaps still." Without another word, he turned from the archway, his boots crunching softly across the frost-covered stones as he headed toward his mount. Behind him, Aeliana knelt beside the glyphwork, her fingers already glowing with a soft tracing spell. Lyra followed, still silent, casting one last glance at the shimmering arch. Somewhere far beyond that gate, a young elf walked alone through realms unseen, and the Guardians were no longer the only ones who could open the way. Chapter 2. The Old Paths. The portal shimmered into being with a muted hum, elegant, efficient, controlled. A silver-edged spiral of light formed mid-air before unfurling like a scroll. Mylorian stepped through without hesitation. The world on the other side was quieter. Older, Maren had always preferred solitude. The cottage stood nestled among whispering trees, perched at the edge of a high cliff that overlooked the storm-carved valley below. Ivy curled across the stone walls, wind chimes made of enchanted bone, and crystals swayed gently in the breeze, each note tuned to resonate with ley line pulses. As the portal dissolved behind him, Mylorian took a breath and allowed himself the brief indulgence of memory. There was a time when he and Maren had walked the same path, both guardians, both brilliant, both reckless in their youth. But where Mylorian had chosen duty, Maren had chosen distance. The door opened before Mylorian could knock. Might have known it'd be you? Maren's voice was low and even, with the same dry edge it had always carried. His silver hair was tied loosely behind his shoulders, and his long robe bore the marks of ink and ash from some unfinished project. When the council sends someone, they send the coldest shadow first. Mylorian didn't rise to the bait. You got the letter? I did. Maren stepped aside. Come in. The tea's still hot, though I imagine you're not here for pleasantries. The room was filled with books and tools, ley-line charts, enchanted objects, half-assembled artifacts. And there, resting atop a folded cloth on the central table, was a letter. Ronan's letter. The envelope had been carefully opened. Its contents had clearly been read many times. Mylorian didn't sit. He moved to the window instead, staring out at the horizon. I need to know everything, he said at last. Where he went, how he activated it, and what he's become. Maren crossed his arms, leaning back against a shelf. I told him to be careful, to be discreet. But I also told him he was something the world hadn't seen in a long time. He awakened a dormant portal, Mylorian said flatly. One that hadn't pulsed in decades. That kind of magic doesn't lie dormant without cost. No, Maren agreed, but it doesn't awaken without purpose either. Mylorian turned sharply. You trained him. You knew what he was becoming. I suspected, Maren said, picking up the letter, but I didn't understand. Not fully. Not until he passed the test. Not until he saw something I couldn't. He handed over the letter without further words. Mylorian read it slowly. Ronan's handwriting was youthful but steady. The words were thoughtful, clear, determined. I go with open eyes, a searching heart, and every lesson you taught me, etched into my bones. The old guardian exhaled through his nose. You should have told the council. I told you, Maren said evenly, because I knew you'd come. You, not Vaelith, not Thandor. You were the only one who might still understand what it means when the ley itself chooses someone. Mylorian said nothing for a long moment. Then, I have 2 apprentices at the portal site, Aeliana and Lyra. Maren raised a brow. That Lyra? Mylorian gave a tight nod. This may not be the end of things. If the portal was restored, others may follow it. Others may feel the ripple. If Ronan is what I think he is, then he's already walking roads none of us can predict, Maren finished. But maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the realms need. Outside, the wind shifted. Far across the ley, a single stream of light shimmered where no one else could see it. And somewhere out there, Ronan walked on. Chapter 3. Echoes in the Stone. The portal still pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of something long buried but not forgotten. Aeliana stood at its edge, Eyes narrowed, her palm hovering just above the rune-etched archway. Pale silver threads of ley line energy drifted faintly through the air like frost in sunlight, subtle but present. Lyra leaned back against a mossy boulder, arms crossed, the long braid of her raven hair catching the wind. So, what are we waiting for? It's just an old broken gate. Kid messed with it. Got lucky. End of mystery. Aeliana didn't respond right away. Her fingers brushed the air again, slower this time. It's not just power, she murmured. It's intent. Lyra cocked her head. Intent? There's something lingering here, Aeliana said softly. Not from the portal itself, from the person who opened it. Emotion, conflict, a desperate kind of clarity. Lyra pushed off the boulder, boots crunching softly against fallen leaves. You're saying you felt feelings from the portal? She let out a sharp laugh. What's next? You going to tell me it whispered your name? No. Aeliana straightened and turned to face her. I'm saying this wasn't just a surge of energy. It was focused, deliberate. Someone opened this with purpose. And they left something behind. Not residue, not magic. Memory dot. Lyra studied her a moment, then shrugged. Maybe you've been training under Maelorian too long. Starting to sound like him. Aeliana glanced back at the arch. If you'd been standing where I was just now, you would have felt it too. I don't feel ghosts, Lyra said dryly. Number, but I think this portal does. The words hung there for a beat too long. Lyra looked at the stone ring. So what now? Wait for Maelorion to get back with answers. For now, we guard it, study it, quietly. If this portal was truly restored by accident, it still shouldn't have been possible. Aeliana paused. And, if it wasn't by accident, then someone out there just walked into another realm, alone. She didn't say it out loud, but the implications settled between them. Whoever did it wasn't coming back the same. You know, Lyra said, pacing a half-step closer to the arch. There's a simple way to figure this out. Aeliana didn't answer. She was back to studying the old glyphs near the base, quietly tracing the fractured inlay with her fingers. Lyra's smirk grew. We activate it. Step through. See where it goes. Aeliana's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Oh, come on, Lyra waved a hand. What better way to investigate a portal than to use the portal? Aeliana rose smoothly to her feet. This isn't a shadow passage behind the kitchens, Lyra. It's a gateway. Unregistered, untested, unstable, and unauthorized. All the more reason to see what it's hiding. Lyra's eyes glittered with challenge. Aren't you even curious? What if someone needs help on the other side? What if something's wrong and we're just standing here cataloguing runes while someone suffers? This is not a rescue mission. Aeliana stepped between her and the portal. We are here to protect the balance. We don't go blindly barging through unknown gates without confirmation, preparation, or council approval. Lyra threw up her hands. You sound like you swallowed the code of balance whole. And you sound like you're trying to get both of us exiled. Wouldn't be my first threat of exile, Lyra muttered under her breath. Aeliana's jaw tightened. This is not a joke. I'm not joking, Lyra barked. I'm bored, Aeliana. We stand around, we record things, we talk about risk. But what if this is the risk worth taking? What if this is the moment the balance actually needs us to act? Aeliana stepped forward, eyes like polished steel. You think you're the only one who wants to act. You think I don't feel it. That pull, that urgency? I do. But that's exactly why we don't rush. Because power without control is not balance. It's chaos. Lyra's breath came hard. You think the person who opened this portal did it with perfect control? No, Aeliana said calmly. But I think we should learn from their recklessness, not repeat it. They stood there, inches apart, the portal humming faintly behind them. Between them, discipline and fire. Purpose and instinct. Lyra looked away first. Fine, we wait. Aeliana's voice softened just slightly. Good. That's why Maelorian sent us. Because one of us thinks with her heart, and the other remembers why we stand watch in the first place. Lyra's reply was low. Let's hope your way doesn't get us all killed. You know, Lyra said, pacing a half-step closer to the arch, there's a simple way to figure this out. Aeliana didn't answer. She was back to studying the old glyphs near the base, quietly tracing the fractured inlay with her fingers. Lyra's smirk grew. We activate it, step through, see where it goes. Aeliana's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Oh, come on, Lyra waved a hand. What better way to investigate a portal than to use the portal? Aeliana rose smoothly to her feet. This isn't a shadow passage behind the kitchens, Lyra. It's a gateway. Unregistered, untested, unstable, and unauthorized. All the more reason to see what it's hiding. Lyra's eyes glittered with challenge. Aren't you even curious? What if someone needs help on the other side? What if something's wrong and we're just standing here cataloguing runes while someone suffers? This is not a rescue mission. Aeliana stepped between her and the portal. We are here to protect the balance. We don't go blindly barging through unknown gates without confirmation, preparation, or council approval. Lyra threw up her hands. You sound like you swallowed the code of balance whole. And you sound like you're trying to get both of us exiled. Wouldn't be my first threat of exile, Lyra muttered under her breath. Aeliana's jaw tightened. This is not a joke. I'm not joking, Lyra barked. I'm bored, Aeliana. We stand around, we record things, we talk about risk. But what if this is the risk worth taking? What if this is the moment the balance actually needs us to act? Aeliana stepped forward, eyes like polished steel. You think you're the only one who wants to act? You think I don't feel it? That pull, that urgency? I do. But that's exactly why we don't rush. Because power without control is not balance. It's chaos. Lyra's breath came hard. You think the person who opened this portal did it with perfect control? No, Aeliana said calmly. But I think we should learn from their recklessness, not repeat it. They stood there, inches apart, the portal humming faintly behind them. Between them, discipline and fire, purpose and instinct. Lyra looked away first. Fine, we wait. Aeliana's voice softened, just slightly. Good. That's why Maelorian sent us, because one of us thinks with her heart, and the other remembers why we stand watch in the first place. Lyra's reply was low. Let's hope your way doesn't get us all killed. Chapter 4. Only the silence knew. The wind had changed. It carried a sharper chill, threading between the high spires of Alfheim and rustling the leaves like whispered warnings. The portal site stood quiet. Aeliana sat cross-legged in the grass, hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, not meditating, just waiting, observing, listening to the world's breath. Lyra leaned against a moss-covered stone nearby, flipping a small throwing dagger between her fingers. She hadn't said much since their argument. For once, silence clung to her. Then came the shimmer of light, the hush of dimensional cloth folding inward. The air rippled. Maelorian stepped through the newly formed arch, his cloak trailing behind him like dusk. Counselor, Aeliana stood immediately. Welcome back, Lyra added, voice careful. Maelorian nodded to both but said nothing at first. He looked older today, not in age but in gravity. He moved to the portal and placed a hand on one of its restored pillars. You've kept it stable, he said quietly. Aeliana inclined her head. We reinforce the matrix daily. It holds, though it hums stronger at night, like it's remembering something. Maelorion didn't answer right away. He traced the faint rune work with 2 fingers as though confirming something. Then finally, the boy's name is Ronan. Lyra straightened. The one who activated it? Yes. He left 3 letters behind. 1 to his father, 1 to his teacher, 1 to his mother. And? Aeliana asked. tone unreadable. And, Melorian said, turning to them, he is not a fool. A moment passed. Even Lyra didn't interrupt. Maren trained him, Mylorian continued. More than that, he watched him change. The boy didn't simply activate the portal, he restored it, repaired glyphs, reinforced channel lines, and then he listened. To what? Aeliana asked, her brow drawn. Melorian met her gaze. To the lay. Aeliana inhaled sharply. But only guardians can number some guardians, Melorian said. And even we require years of training to hear its pull. But Ronan, he hears it like a whisper behind every heartbeat. Maren believes something happened to him. A surge. An awakening. He believes it's tied to the collapse in Eldamire. Lyra let out a low whistle. That would have rippled across the whole realm web. It did, Mylorian confirmed, and this boy was at a nexus when it struck. Does the council know? Aeliana asked, already standing straighter. Not all of it. Not yet. He paced a few steps, then stopped. This portal, he said, nodding to the structure behind them, remains unstable, and now that it's active, it must be watched. We cannot allow any unknown gateway to sit unguarded in Alfheim, especially one opened outside of council control. Then what do we do? Lyra asked, resting her dagger. Melorian turned to both of them. You will remain here, the two of you. Observe it, study the resonance, document any changes, even minor ones. He turned to Aeliana. You are lead on this. The council trusts your discipline. Then to Lyra. And you. Don't let your curiosity become recklessness, but don't bury it either. You see things in ways others don't. Use that. Lyra blinked. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was a directive, Melorian said dryly. He looked back to the portal one last time. There's a reason Ronan left the way he did. A reason he walked a forgotten path. If he's still alive, the world may need what he's becoming. Then, without another word, Mylorian vanished through the shimmer of his return portal. Only the silence knew what came next. Chapter 5. The Reckless Step. The courtyard surrounding the restored portal shimmered under the watchful eyes of the elven detachment. Runes along the arch still glowed faintly, stable now, thanks to Ronan's work. Aeliana stood at its base, her hands folded behind her back, eyes distant as she reviewed the chain of events. Melorian had departed hours ago, slipping through a personal gate to speak directly with Master Maren. The rest of the investigation, for now, was hers to manage. Stay alert, she told the captain of the guard. No one enters the portal without direct authorization. He nodded, but his attention drifted as voices rose from the estate. Ronan's parents had arrived, grief and frustration carried plainly on their faces. His mother's worry was near palpable, while his father's pride kept his posture rigid, despite the concern in his eyes. Aeliana turned to meet them. He left a letter, she said gently, offering the parchment they already knew by heart. It wasn't done in haste. That doesn't make it right, Ronan's father said, jaw tight. That portal could have led anywhere. And now you've left it open in the middle of our realm? A detachment of elven guards had set up perimeter watch, keeping curious eyes from wandering too close to the ancient portal Ronan had reawakened. Aeliana was in deep discussion with Ronan's parents, particularly his father, who demanded answers. Aeliana stood near the restored portal, parchment in hand, her face calm but firm. We understand your concerns, she said to Ronan's father, but the council must proceed cautiously. This portal is unregistered. Its presence here, so close to your home, without oversight. Ronan's mother stepped in gently. My son did not open it in secret to defy you. He heard something calling to him. Aeliana's gaze softened briefly at that. She glanced toward the portal. Sometimes the lay stirs louder for a few. Behind them, bored and quiet far too long, Lyra wandered near the dais, eyes narrowing on the portal. Her fingers traced the edge of the runes. Something buzzed faintly beneath her skin. "You know," Lyra said aloud, not bothering to whisper, "we could debate policies all year. Or," she held up a shimmering glyph key she'd borrowed earlier, "we could just walk through." Aeliana froze. "Lyra!" But the portal flared to life. A swirl of ley energy spun around the archway, a stable vortex forming before their eyes. The guards tensed. Aeliana turned sharply just as Lyra took a step back and grinned over her shoulder. "The world is full of forgotten things," she said. "Some of us just make a point of finding them." And she stepped through. Aeliana's heart jumped into her throat. She turned to the guards. "Hold your position. Do not follow." Ronan's father shouted, "What is she doing?" "Something reckless," Aeliana muttered, already moving. She paused just before the portal. Its currents pulsed, not unstable but unfamiliar. It was still drawing from the ley line. That meant the frame held. But without knowing what lay on the other side, still, she could not leave Lyra alone. Aeliana's jaw tightened as the portal shimmered. She turned to the elven captain stationed near the steps. "Captain, notify Councillor Malorian immediately, and in exactly 3 days, open this portal again. No sooner, no later." The captain hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Yes, Guardian." Aeliana gave one last glance to Ronan's stunned parents, her expression unreadable, and then turned toward the pulsing gateway. Her hand hovered briefly over the runes, feeling their rhythm, sensing their draw. "Oh, Lyra, what have you done now?" And then she stepped through. Chapter 6. The world tore sideways. One moment, Ronan was standing in the stone ring of the portal he had reawakened with so much effort. The next, he was flung forward, tumbling through a searing veil of light and pressure. His boots hit the ground and he stumbled to his knees. Pain hit him instantly, not from the landing, but from the air itself. He clutched his head as raw magic screamed against his senses. It wasn't just pressure, it was grief, anguish, desperation. Emotions saturated the very ley line current beneath his feet, warped and thrashing like a wounded thing. He gasped, coughing against the burning in his lungs. The scent of scorched stone and ancient ash filled his nose. When he forced his eyes open, the world before him shimmered in ruin. He was standing in what remained of a vast plaza. Cracked marble stretched in every direction, some of it rippled and warped from unimaginable force. Rubble lay in concentric rings, as if the destruction had radiated outward from where he now stood. In the centre behind him was what had once been a portal frame, now little more than blackened metal twisted into a jagged crescent. The devastation around him stretched out for hundreds of meters. Buildings had collapsed into themselves, statues were shattered, fountains lay dry and choked with dust. The wind howled through empty arches, and no birds sang. He rose slowly, trembling. "Where am I?" He didn't recognize the architecture. The stonework was older than anything he'd seen in Alfheim, yet finely crafted. Whatever city this had been, it was grand once. A hub. Maybe a capital. Now it was a scar in the world. Ronan turned in a slow circle. His senses, though rattled, began to adjust. He could feel the ley line here, just barely. It was fractured, flickering like a candle in a storm. The energy didn't flow. It throbbed, pained and wild. He focused on it, steadying his breath. What happened here? There was no clue, no sign, only a silence that felt too deliberate. Not the peace of abandonment, but the void left behind by something broken, too violently to be rebuilt. He crouched beside a shard of crystal, a piece of what might have once been a stabilizer core. It thrummed with residual energy, but it was cracked. When his fingers brushed it, he flinched. Fear. A deep mortal fear had been poured into it. He pulled his hand back and shook his head. How long has it been like this? There was no answer, only wind and ruin. He knew one thing for certain: no one had stood in this place for a long, long time. No one had walked through this gate. No guardian had tended this place. It had been sealed, lost, and left to decay. And now he was here, alone. The charred earth cracked beneath Ronan's boots as he moved away from the crater, each step taking him farther from the devastation and deeper into the unknown. The portal site, if it could still be called that, was now behind him, a shattered memory of what once linked this realm to others. As the scorched stone gave way to soil, signs of life began to return, but not in any familiar way. Ancient buildings, once proud and carved with grace, now stood as half-swallowed relics beneath a rising tide of roots and vines, trees pressed against crumbling facades. Moss clung to shattered archways. Nature, it seemed, had begun to reclaim the ruins, but without songbirds, without insects, without movement. The air was too quiet. No birdsong, no wind, not even the distant rustle of leaves. Ronan paused at the edge of a collapsed garden. A rusted bench lay upturned beside a dry fountain choked in ivy. And there, half buried in loam and leaf, he saw it. A silver pendant, faintly glowing with residual magic. Kneeling, he brushed the dirt aside and held it in his palm. The enchantment was weak, fading, but old and mourning. The feeling slipped into him before he could resist, a wave of sorrow and stillness, like someone had worn it while waiting for an end that never came. He exhaled slowly. What happened here? The question had no answer, but something inside the pendant pulsed once, softly like a heartbeat. Ronan slipped it into his pouch and stood. That's when he felt it. A chill skittered across his shoulders. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. A weight pressed down, not physical, but present, watching, listening. He spun, eyes scanning broken windows, darkened archways, rustling branches. Nothing, but the feeling didn't go away. He pressed his palm to a low stone wall and reached, not with his eyes, but with the sense Maren had taught him to trust. The quiet hum of latent enchantment drifted through the ruins. But now, another thread wove through it. Darker, intentional. Someone, or something, knew he was here. And it was waiting. Ronan pressed on. The sensation of being watched never left him, but it didn't grow closer. It simply was like a gaze from behind a curtain, hidden, constant, and patient. He moved through winding stone paths overtaken by nature, careful not to disturb the thick vines that coiled like snakes across the flagstones. The air thickened with damp earth and forgotten dust. Time felt stretched here, warped as if the realm itself had forgotten how to breathe. Then he saw it. Half buried beneath a collapsed terrace and a tangle of roots stood a domed structure of smooth black stone. Ivy clawed across its face, and moss filled the cracks like old scars. But the dome held. Its carved door, flanked by ancient columns, remained sealed, untouched by whatever catastrophe had swallowed the city. There were glyphs etched into the arch above the entrance. He raised his hand and brushed away the moss. Archive of the Narethyl Enclave. The words shimmered faintly, responding to his touch. Magic, old, careful, and deliberate. Ronan pressed his palm to the seal. He didn't try to force it. He listened. Like Maren had taught him. The enchantment was layered, protective, but not defensive. It waited for recognition, not by name but by resonance. Ronan let his energy drift outward, coaxing the lock rather than breaking it. A pulse answered him, software curious. The door clicked. A low rumble followed as the stone doors split open, releasing a gust of cold, dry air into the green-draped ruin. Dust swirled, carrying the scent of parchment and time. Ronan stepped inside. The darkness swallowed him whole at first, but then the runes lining the interior flickered to life. soft amber light illuminating tall shelves and scroll crates. This was no common library. These records weren't just books, they were infused with memories, fragments of spellwork, and echoes of the voices that had written them. He stepped closer to a nearby pedestal where a crystal floated in place, softly glowing. The moment he touched it, the room shifted. Not physically, emotionally. The archive remembered. A flash, an echo of voices, frantic, urgent. We must seal the portal, now! They're breaking through. Gods, what is that? A sense of overwhelming panic surged through him. He staggered back, gripping the pedestal. This wasn't just an archive, it was a record of the fall. He steadied his breath and whispered, "What happened to this realm?" And the archive, in its own ancient way, began to answer. The archive welcomed him. Once the emotional surge settled, Ronan found himself drifting from shelf to shelf, his fingertips brushing over old scrolls, charmed parchments, and rune-inscribed bindings. Each item seemed to hum with its own forgotten song, one only he could hear. This was his element. In the soft glow of memory crystals and the whisper of brittle pages, he was no longer a runaway or a disappointment. He was a seeker. A scroll sealed in dark blue wax caught his attention. Its language was older than anything he'd studied, but the enchantment woven into it whispered to him, shaping the words in his mind. He broke the seal. From the circle of the Emberborn, 3rd year of the veiled exodus. The writing was meticulous, emotionally restrained, yet brimming with a dangerous certainty. We did not flee Alfheim. We chose exile. We, the enlightened, refused to remain shackled by the Guardian's rigid obsession with balance. What good is balance when evil festers and action is forbidden? We have power. We have vision. We will guide the realms toward unity, not chaos. Ronan blinked. He read it again, then again. This wasn't just history. It was heresy, from the Guardian's point of view. He rifled through the scroll cases, locating several marked with the same sigil, a tri-flame spiral. The more he read, the more a picture formed. This realm had once been a sanctuary for a sect of elven exiles from Alfheim. They'd left, by choice, not force, fleeing the doctrine of neutrality enforced by the Guardian Council. They called themselves the Emberborn. Not because of fire, but because they believed in igniting change across the realms. They rejected the Guardian's code. They believed in intervention. They'd built this city, this realm, as a beacon of a new order. One where the realms could be steered, protected, and if necessary, controlled for the greater good. And they had paid the price. Ronan leaned back against the edge of the table, mind spinning. Were they villains? Visionaries? Were they crushed by something they couldn't predict? Or did Alfheim strike them down? He moved to a side alcove filled with loose star charts and realm maps. His hand hovered over one, then another, until a rolled leather case caught his eye. He unwrapped it gently. A realm network. Faded lines connected not just Alfheim and Earth, but dozens of realms Ronan didn't recognize, and in the center, a glowing rune overlaying the city he now stood in. Beside it, a name carved in precise, slanted script. Narethyl. He whispered it. Something shifted in the air behind him, like the echo of a memory leaning closer. Narethyl, the name of a realm lost to time, buried by ideology, forgotten by force but not lost to him. Chapter 7. The Weight of Ash and Eyes. The sealed door of the archive groaned open, pushing back a century of silence and sealing dust. Ronan stepped out, blinking in the strange green light. His eyes adjusted slowly. Then they widened. Figures, dozens of them, robed, masked, and utterly still. They had surrounded the entrance, some perched on the crumbled remnants of the outer walls. Others stood like statues between trees and ruined pillars. Cloaks of root-dyed fabric blended with the forest, and their faces were half-covered. Some with carved wood, others with bone. Magic prickled in the air, but not the kind Ronan knew. This was older, raw, bound up with fear and memory. He stepped forward just one step. A shout rang out. Then a crack. Pain bloomed behind his eyes. Something struck him hard across the temple. He hit the ground, breath gone, stars swarming his vision. A knee drove into his back. Hands yanked his arms behind him. "Don't move," someone barked. Ronan couldn't have moved if he wanted to. What was he doing inside? A harsh voice demanded. He opened it. He was inside the ash sanctum. "He's one of them," another spat. "One more arrogant mage come to finish what the last one started." He came through the portal. "That doesn't mean he belongs." A heated, panicked chorus swelled. Accusations, fear, raw fury. Ronan groaned, trying to speak. "I didn't mean—" A fist cracked across his cheek. "Silence!" He slumped, bleeding, dazed. The mob's tension coiled tighter, growing dangerously close to irreversible. Then, a single voice cut through the noise. "Enough!" Stillness fell like a dropped veil. The crowd parted without a word. She moved slowly, age worn into every graceful motion. But her presence was a blade of its own. Silver braids hung down her back. Her eyes, clouded but sharp, fixed on Ronan like she'd already seen the path behind and ahead. The mother of balance. No one spoke as she knelt beside him. Not even the guards holding him dared to breathe. She touched the blood on his cheek, then pressed 2 fingers to his temple. "Let him up!" "But I said up!" Ronan coughed and rolled to one side, flinching as his ribs shifted. He looked up at her. Pain clouded his senses, but he could still feel it, that same strange pull of magic. Emotion in the air. "You stepped into a cursed place," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I didn't know," he rasped. "I swear, I just wanted to know what happened." The mother stared at him long enough that it began to hurt. Then, softly, "He doesn't carry a mage's pride, only a seeker's mistake." The others still burned with suspicion, but her words held weight. "We will not kill a boy for a trespass," she said at last, "but we will watch him, and he will answer." She stood. "Bring him." And Ronan, bleeding, shaken but still breathing, was hauled to his feet and led deeper into the ruins, his first steps into a realm that remembered far too well the price of forgotten things. Chapter 8. Judged by Ash. They led him to the temple that was, not a true structure anymore, just a half-sunken stone ring with moss-covered steps and the shattered remains of what might have once been a sacred dais. Torches flickered, not for light, but ritual. Ronan stood, barely steady, his wrists bound in braided vine. Blood had dried on his cheek, his chest ached, and she waited. The mother of balance stood in the centre of the dais, alone. Her silver hair gleamed under moonlight that filtered through a hole in the canopy. "Leave us," she said. The guards hesitated. "I will not say it again." They obeyed, though reluctantly. Ronan was left standing in the quiet circle, breath shallow. She studied him, not with suspicion, but with measurement, as though weighing something deep and ancient. "You went into the ash sanctum." "Yes." "You opened it." "I did." "Why?" Ronan hesitated. He could lie, but the weight of this place crushed deception like dry leaves. "I was trying to understand. I came through a broken portal. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know anything, but I felt something. The magic. I followed it." "You felt it?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "Describe it." He furrowed his brow. It was like pressure, like breath held for too long, but also like grief, or maybe guilt. It was thick, old. It hurt. The mother's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you could read the sanctum?" He nodded slowly. It spoke through feeling. Emotion left in the walls. I saw who they were, what they believed, what they did wrong. Her lips parted in the faintest gasp, but not surprise. Recognition. "You are not from here," she said. "No." And yet the lay answered you. It did. She stepped back and turned, hands clasped behind her. Her shoulders were proud despite her age. "This place was not always broken," she said. "Once we believed in guidance, in strength, in our right to shape fate, but the magic did not agree." She turned back to him. "We tell the young that the gods struck down the city, but it was the arrogance of our ancestors that drew the blade." Ronan swallowed. "I think I was meant to see it." "Perhaps," she murmured. "Or perhaps you are just the latest in a line of those who think they are special." He flinched. That one hit deeper than expected. She stepped close again, placing a hand on his chest. "Your magic runs strangely, boy. It stirs old memories. The lay speaks to you. That should not be possible. I didn't ask for it. Number. But it found you." Silence stretched. "Will you run?" she asked. "Now that you've been caught?" "No." "Will you lie?" "No." "Then listen closely." Her voice became steel. "We are what's left. We are balance, reborn in shame and ash. You have walked into a wound that has not healed. Everything you do from here on will either reopen it or help it mend. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Ronan whispered. She exhaled. "Then you may sleep among us tonight, under guard. In the morning, I will decide what to do with you." She turned, beginning to walk away. "Wait," he said. "What should I call you?" She paused, half-turned. "Mother," she said simply, "the only one still living who remembers the fire, and the last willing to speak for it." Then she was gone, robes rustling against the moss, leaving Ronan alone under the weight of too many eyes, too many expectations, and a magic older than anything he'd ever touched. Chapter 9. Echoes in the Locket. Ronan sat cross-legged beneath the thick canvas of a makeshift tent near the outer edge of the camp. A lone lantern cast amber light against the tightly drawn seams, flickering each time the wind stirred the trees. The guards hadn't left, of course. He could feel their eyes beyond the flap, one on each side. Quiet. Still. He exhaled slowly and reached into his pack, fingers brushing against wrapped cloth, then something cool and metallic. The locket. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing the oval shape etched in faded gold filigree, its face cracked and smeared with soot. He had found it earlier that day, in the ruins just outside the archive, half buried in ivy and ash. It had pulsed faintly in his palm. Warm, familiar, lonely. Click. The clasp resisted at first, then yielded with a soft snap. Inside was a fragment of a pressed flower, long dead, but preserved by some lingering enchantment. A whisper of lavender, the scent faint but clear even now. And behind it, etched into the inner lid, a name in ancient elvish script. Ronan's breath caught. Lyra. Before he could decipher more, the canvas flap ripped open. "Don't move!" a voice barked. Ronan flinched as 3 guards stormed into the tent, weapons drawn and pointed at the locket in his hands. The glow from its core, subtle just moments ago, was now a low pulse, like a heartbeat responding to fear. "Where did you get that?" one guard demanded, his voice shaking. "I found it," Ronan said, raising his free hand. "In the ruins. I didn't steal it, You brought it here?" Another hissed, his eyes wide. "You brought that into the living camp?" The 3rd guard didn't speak. He just stared at the locket like it was a ghost. Ronan closed it slowly, careful not to provoke them. "What is it?" "You don't know," the first one said. "That's a soul relic. Forbidden. Cursed. The kind that calls things." Ronan's spine went cold. "Calls what?" The 3rd guard finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "The past." One of the others turned to run. "I'm getting the mother." Ronan didn't stop him. He looked down at the locket again, now clutched tightly in his palm. It was no longer glowing. But the moment it had opened, he'd felt it, the memory inside. Not words, not images, but grief, longing, love sealed inside something too fragile for time to break. Not a weapon, a wound. He looked up at the two guards still staring at him like he might explode. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I just felt it needed to be remembered." Neither responded, but behind them, outside the tent, footsteps approached. Light and slow. The guards stiffened, and then the voice of the mother came, sharp as flint. "Bring it to me." Chapter 10. Whispers in the Camp. The wind shifted. It always did when something stirred the past. At first, it was small, barely noticed. A child dropped her bowl of roots near the central fire and stared wide-eyed at the sky, claiming she felt the breath of the old gods. No one believed her. Not until the old hawk, blind and tethered for 3 winters, screeched and took flight. Then the warding stones around the eastern perimeter began to hum. By the time the watch captain arrived, half the camp had gathered near the communal ring, murmurs rising like steam from a boiling pot. "Something's wrong. They say he brought it from the ash fields. A relic, a real one. The kind that sings to the ruins." Children were pulled close. Fires were doused. A few elders, older than most and etched with grief, began pacing near the central statue of the balance, whispering prayers. The statue, a worn sculpture of an open hand cradling a feather and a stone, had not been touched in decades. Tonight, someone laid a fresh branch of green leaves at its base. Captain Thalos shoved through the crowd, jaw clenched, his hand resting on the hilt of a ceremonial blade that hadn't seen use in years. "Where is he?" he barked at the nearest guard. "Still in the old shelter, sir, with the relic." "And the mother? On her way." He cursed under his breath. "Then tell the elders to prepare the circle. If that thing calls, we're not waiting for it to finish the sentence." As the crowd shifted again, some drew away, muttering about ancient wards and broken pacts. Others pressed forward, craning their necks for a glimpse of the outsider, the boy with firelight in his eyes and ashes on his boots. Someone whispered, "A walker." Someone else whispered, "A curse." The panic was quiet, but growing, like a storm building just beyond the tree line. And at its centre a tent flapped open, and the mother stepped through the camp like a blade sliding from its sheath. Her eyes were already on the locket. Chapter 11. The Mother of Balance. The guards parted like wheat before a scythe. She walked without ceremony, yet every footstep struck the earth with quiet gravity. Bare feet against dirt, silver hair braided with strands of bark and bone, and robes faded with time but immaculately kept. She bore no staff, no crown, only presence. Ronan stood just outside the tent, his back to the ash-stained walls, the silver locket still clutched in his palm. He knew the moment she arrived. The world shifted, the wind calmed, the murmurs stopped, and when he looked up, she was already watching him. Her voice was not loud, but it carried like thunder through still air. "Do you know what you've brought into our haven, child?" Ronan swallowed. I found it near the edge of the city. I didn't know what it was. Just that it felt important. It sang." The guards tensed behind her, hands hovered near blades. A few others, young and afraid, held smooth stones carved with balance symbols, knuckles white around the edges. But the mother raised a hand. "I do not fault curiosity," she said slowly. "It is the nature of youth to reach toward things they do not yet understand." She stepped closer. Eyes like polished obsidian bore into him, ancient and unflinching. "But what you carry," she whispered, "should not exist." Ronan dared a glance at the locket. "It's a memory, a trace of something, someone." "A relic of the old arrogance," she corrected. "A fragment of a soul, torn from the weave and trapped in silver and spellcraft. These are the things that burned our city, that drew down wrath upon this realm." He looked back toward the ruins beyond the trees. You think it was punishment? We know it was balance restored, she said firmly. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she stepped even closer and extended a hand, not to strike, but to see. Give it to me. Ronan hesitated. Every instinct screamed to protect it, to understand it. But he opened his hand. The mother took the locket. Her fingers, lined with age and wisdom, curled gently around it. At first, she said nothing. Then her eyes flickered, just slightly. A ripple in the calm. She recognized something. When she looked back up, her voice was softer. Where did you find this exactly? Ronan blinked. Near the crater's edge, buried beneath a collapsed archway, half melted. She looked off toward the distant ruins, her expression unreadable. You will come with me, she said at last. The relic will be sealed. But you? She turned, sharp and decisive. You have seen what no one has dared look upon in a generation. That knowledge is not yours to carry alone. She walked away without waiting for his answer. Ronan stood frozen, and in the distance the locket pulsed faintly in her grasp, its light dimming, but not dead. They moved through the heart of the village in silence. Ronan followed behind the Mother of Balance, flanked by guards who kept a respectful distance, but not too respectful. Their wariness was palpable. One hand always near a weapon, one eye always watching his. The path wound between massive root-wrapped buildings, their foundations once elegant stonework, now overtaken by the wild. Flowers bloomed in crevices. Moss spilled from broken archways. The air was rich with wood smoke, dew, and something older, the hush of reverence. Children peered out from high balconies. Adults paused mid-task, heads turning as he passed. He came from the city. He held it in his hands, the silver one. Did you see her face? She stilled. Ronan kept his gaze forward, but his ears caught every word. This wasn't just a village. It was a sanctuary, a place held together by belief, by discipline, by fear of what once was. He passed a courtyard where a group of teens practiced forms with staff and stone. One paused, lowering his weapon slightly as Ronan passed. Their eyes met, and in the boy's gaze was not hate, but a question. A small group of elders stood in a circle around a tree whose bark was etched with runes of balance. As the mother passed, they nodded solemnly. We should have sealed the archive completely. It was fate. The city calls to those marked by magic. Perhaps he is the sign. The mother slowed her pace, and Ronan nearly stumbled trying to match it. She glanced back once, then turned toward a long, sloping structure at the far edge of the village. It resembled a temple or meeting hall, but vines now clung to its beams, and birds nested in its high recesses. The heavy door creaked open as she approached. Inside, she said softly. This is where truth is spoken. Ronan stepped through. Inside, the air was cool, diamond soise. Sunlight filtered through stained glass remnants above, casting gentle hues across a circular stone floor. At the center was a shallow basin of water, still, clear, reflecting the ceiling like a mirror. The mother motioned for him to sit near it. She walked to the edge and knelt, locket still clutched in one hand. Many think the gods destroyed our city, she said quietly. But it wasn't gods. It was consequence. She dipped the tip of the locket into the water. The reflection shimmered faintly, revealing not images but emotion. Longing, regret, a trace of joy, then grief. This was worn by a child, she murmured, eyes distant. A daughter of one of the last high casters. It was forbidden even then, but she wore it anyway. Ronan knelt beside her, heart thudding. What happened to her? The mother didn't answer. Not with words, but in the water the shimmer deepened. Flames, screams, a soft lullaby echoing through stone halls. And then ash. Ronan flinched. She lifted the locket, closed it, and held it out to him. Keep it. The burden is already yours. He stared at her, stunned. You're letting me stay? I'm letting you choose to stay, she corrected. Because the balance does not fear your presence, but it does watch. Always. She stood. The others will not all agree, but they will listen. For now you are under my protection. As she turned to leave, her voice came one last time. You sought forgotten things. Let us see what you remember. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Balance. The fire in the corner hearth had long since burned down to quiet embers, casting a dim amber glow across the stone walls of the small room Ronan had been given for the night. He lay on a thin cot with his arms behind his head, eyes tracing cracks in the ceiling he couldn't see, lost in thought. The silence was suffocating. Not even the wind whispered beyond the shutters. There were no crickets, no owls, no rustling branches, just stillness. He reached into the satchel by his side and pulled out the small locket, the same one gifted to him back at the tavern, the one with the subtle enchantment of protective luck. It shimmered faintly in the low firelight, not from any magical glow, but because it meant something. It was proof that he'd been somewhere, that he'd done something, that he wasn't just some foolish boy chasing ghosts across the lay. A dry chuckle escaped him as he turned the locket over in his hand. "This'll make one hell of a story," he muttered, voice hushed in the quiet, "if I live to tell it." The bard's voice echoed in his memory as clear as if he stood in the room. The world is full of forgotten things. Someone just has to make a point of finding them. He turned on his side, locket clutched close to his chest. Sleep eventually came. The sound of soft bells stirred him. Not alarm bells, not metal gongs or harsh warning clangs. These were chimes, gentle, melodic, singing faintly through the morning air like whispers riding the breeze. Ronan sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and blinking into the morning light filtering through the open window. Outside, the village stirred. He dressed quickly and stepped out into the cool dawn. The sky above was pale lavender, the sun still stretching toward the horizon. A hush had settled over the village, but unlike the fear the day before, this silence felt intentional, sacred. Dozens of villagers moved through the clearing toward the stone circle at the center of their settlement. Robes in earthy tones fluttered with every movement, browns and greys, creams and dull blues. Some wore simple pendants, others held woven braids in their hands like offerings. But it was the symbol embroidered on each robe that stopped Ronan cold. A circle, bisected by a horizontal line, two opposing swirls within, one dark, one light, a variation of the guardian crest of balance. He moved closer. Unlike the silvers and golds of guardian insignias, these symbols were rendered in quiet, natural colours. The circle was stitched in ash grey, the swirls, one brown, one pale blue. The thread looked hand-dyed, like it came from bark and stream water. These weren't ranks, they were beliefs. A young man no older than Ronan noticed him and gave a small nod. "You woke just in time. This is the day of reckoning," he said quietly. "We remember what was lost. We promise not to repeat it." Ronan swallowed, watching as the villagers entered the stone circle in absolute silence. There in the centre stood a monolith, not tall, worn, cracked down one side, but the same crest, the symbol of balance, was carved into its face. Offerings were laid at its base, leaves, carved stones, pieces of charred wood, a ceremony not of joy but of solemn reverence. They don't just acknowledge the balance, he thought, they worship it. And in that moment, he understood. These people weren't just survivors. They were guardians in their own right, born of devastation, raised on stories of hubris and ruin. Magic to them wasn't a tool or a blessing. It was a test. And Ronan, newcomer, outsider, bearer of enchantments and ancient knowledge, stood at the edge of that sacred ground, locket hidden beneath his shirt, wondering what judgment would come next. The sun crested the broken edge of the city's skyline, filtered through vines and crumbling towers, casting warm rays across the clearing where the village had gathered. The crowd was silent. Hundreds knelt in concentric circles, each with a hand placed over their heart and the other touching the ground. Even the children were still. At the centre stood the oldest among them, draped in layered silks and woven leathers, tones of moss green and dusky blue. Her long silver hair flowed down her back in a single braid threaded with pale feathers. The Mother of Balance. Ronan remained at the edge of the crowd, unseen or deliberately ignored. No one had spoken to him since the locket incident the night before, though he hadn't been thrown in chains, which was something. The old woman raised her hands. The moment her fingers unfurled, the wind seemed to still. Her voice, though frail in timbre, carried like the whisper of thunder. When arrogance rose, it fell upon us like fire from the sky. When we forgot the balance, the earth remembered it for us. And when our ancestors built power instead of peace, they opened the door to destruction. Her gaze swept the kneeling forms. Not with judgment, but sorrow. 100 years we have lived in the ruins of our own making, not as punishment, but as reminder. Balance is not silence. It is not surrender. It is harmony. Magic is not evil, nor is knowledge. But without restraint, without purpose, power consumes. She lifted the carved staff beside her, pressing its tip gently into the ground. A wave of golden mist shimmered across the stone floor, ancient runes glowing in brief patterns underfoot before fading again. We survive because we remembered what the world tried to teach. And we teach, so the world may never forget again. The crowd responded, not in words but in a unified motion. Palms pressed to hearts, heads bowed. Ronan watched from the edge, his breath caught somewhere between awe and guilt. He hadn't meant to offend them, but standing here, witnessing the raw truth etched into their lives, he felt the weight of his intrusion more than ever. And yet, he also understood something else. They hadn't lost faith in magic. They had learned how to fear it, respect it, frame it with reverence rather than domination. The kind of reverence guardians were sworn to protect. His thoughts returned to the guardian's crest, and the way the villagers wore a variant of it across their ceremonial robes, though their colours were muted, earthy, and marked not by rank, but by principle. He didn't know it yet, but he was beginning to see the echoes of Alfheim's greatest debate, played out in isolation, reborn in humility. And somewhere in that truth might be the path forward. As the final echoes of the ceremony faded into the morning breeze, the villagers began to rise, quiet at first, then gradually blooming into motion. Baskets were uncovered, fires were lit. The sombre reverence of the rite gave way to the low hum of activity as the feast preparations began. Ronan hadn't expected a celebration, not after the silent treatment, not after being marched into their camp as a possible threat. But he was led, wordlessly but not unkindly, toward a long, low table made of aged stone slabs covered with hand-woven cloth and lined with shared platters of roots, roasted greens, and something that smelled distinctly of smoked fruit and herbs. He sat, unsure if he was meant to. No one glared, no one smiled either. It was as though he was allowed, but not yet welcomed. Until a small boy with tangled black curls plopped down beside him, grabbed a roasted tuber, and handed Ronan one with wide, unblinking eyes. "You look like you haven't eaten in a moon." Ronan blinked. "Thanks," he muttered. A woman across the table gave him a curt nod. Another passed him a carved bowl of spiced tea. And just like that, the ice cracked. Laughter soon rose in the air, soft at first, then louder. Elders passed stories. Children ran between the tables. The scent of crushed herbs and baked roots filled the square. There were no instruments, but someone began to sing, an old melody that rose and fell like wind through leaves. The Mother of Balance remained seated on a simple chair not far from the fire, her plate untouched, her gaze often drifting to Ronan. Watching, measuring. He met her eyes once. She did not smile, but she did not look away. As the firelight danced against the broken walls of the ancient city, Ronan felt, for the first time since stepping through the portal, a strange stillness. He was an intruder, yes, a question they hadn't asked. But maybe not yet an enemy. He bit into the roasted root. It was surprisingly good. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, he let himself breathe. And listen, because the world was full of forgotten things, and he was beginning to find them. Chapter 13. The Rip in Stillness. The portal ignited with a violent surge, not with grace or ceremony, but with a raw scream of magic, unbalanced, unstable, and hungry. The ruined frame, half buried in the blackened crater of stone and glassed soil, shuddered as its glyphs flared back to life. Power cracked across the surface of the ley-line scar, lighting up the ruins like a storm trapped beneath the earth. And from that storm, Lyra emerged. She stumbled out of the portal's mouth into the dead center of devastation, her boots skidding on charred earth, hand flying up to shield her eyes. She froze. Pain. Not physical, not yet, but something deeper, a pressure behind the eyes, a weight in the bones, like the magic in this place was screaming without sound. "Gods above," she whispered. All around her was nothing. A wound in the world, buildings turned to slag, statues melted into bone-coloured streaks. The centre of this place had taken a magical impact that annihilated everything within 100 metres. And it still hurt to stand here. Even the air was wrong, thick, hot, and humming with residue like a storm had passed through a soul and forgotten to leave. 30 seconds later, the portal flared again. Aeliana stepped through, eyes narrowed in instant alarm, her protective wards flaring the moment her boots touched the scorched ground. "Lyra!" "I didn't touch anything," Lyra muttered. "I just—" A sudden snap echoed through the frame behind them, a flash of light, then silence. The portal died, gone, inert, cold as stone. Aeliana swore softly, spinning toward the ring and placing her hand against it. "It's severed." "Yeah, I noticed." Lyra turned in a slow circle. "What is this place?" "No vegetation, no animals, no ley-line harmony," Aeliana said grimly. "This isn't just ruin. It's a ley wound." A beat, then Lyra shivered. The portal ignited with a violent surge, not with grace or ceremony, but with a raw scream of magic, unbalanced, unstable, and hungry. The ruined frame, half buried in the blackened crater of stone and glassed soil, shuddered as its glyphs flared back to life. Power cracked across the surface of the ley-line scar, lighting up the ruins like a storm trapped beneath the earth. And from that storm, Lyra emerged. She stumbled out of the portal's mouth into the dead center of devastation, her boots skidding on charred earth, hand flying up to shield her eyes. She froze. Pain. Not physical, not yet, but something deeper. A pressure behind the eyes, a weight in the bones, like the magic in this place was screaming without sound. "Gods above," she whispered. All around her was nothing, a wound in the world. Buildings turned to slag, statues melted into bone-coloured streaks. The centre of this place had taken a magical impact that annihilated everything within 100 metres. And it still hurt to stand here. Even the air was wrong, thick, hot, and humming with residue like a storm had passed through a soul and forgotten to leave. 30 seconds later, the portal flared again. Aeliana stepped through, eyes narrowed in instant alarm, her protective wards flaring the moment her boots touched the scorched ground. "Lyra!" "I didn't touch anything," Lyra muttered. "I just—" A sudden snap echoed through the frame behind them, a flash of light, then silence. The portal died, gone, inert, cold as stone. Aeliana swore softly, spinning toward the ring and placing her hand against it. "It's severed." "Yeah, I noticed." Lyra turned in a slow circle. What is this place? No vegetation, no animals, no ley-line harmony, Aeliana said grimly. This isn't just ruin. It's a ley wound. A beat. Then Lyra shivered. The wind was still. Ash crunched beneath their boots as Lyra and Aeliana moved through the scorched remains of the portal site. There was no sign of life, no bird song, no insects, not even wind-touched leaves. Only silence and ruin. Lyra crouched, her fingers tracing a faint disturbance in the soot-covered ground. He was here, she said, voice low. Not long ago. Aeliana moved beside her, surveying the ruined terrain. He activated the portal. He came through. Alone. Lyra gave a short nod, already following the subtle trail northeast, depressions in ash, slight scuffs in the scorched stone. He moved with care, she muttered, scanning further. He wasn't panicked. He knew where he was going, or at least thought he did. They advanced in silence, passing through zones where nature had begun reclaiming the devastation. Cracked stone gave way to overgrown ruins, vines clinging to shattered buildings, moss creeping across statues half swallowed by time. Then Lyra stopped. There. A structure loomed ahead, a grand old building remarkably intact. Ivy crawled up its flanks, but the door had been opened recently. No force marks, no shatter points, just a clean break in the dust across the threshold. Aeliana stepped forward, frowning. The archive? Lyra tilted her head. Looks like it, and it's not locked anymore. They entered cautiously. Inside, the dim light filtered through warped glass. The air smelled of parchment and dust. Scrolls were scattered across a reading table, open but not ransacked. Signs of study, not struggle, but at the back, by a side exit, they found it. Blood, just a small smear. Lyra knelt, eyes narrowing. Fresh. Less than a day. Someone found him. And took him, Aeliana said softly, but not violently. He walked. She glanced around again, noting the orderly piles, the care in how things had been moved. He was taken, but he wasn't resisting. Lyra stood slowly. They knew he was here. They were watching. Aeliana nodded, her face tightening with concern. Then he's not alone, and neither are we. Lyra's eyes flicked toward the tree line beyond the archive's broken windows. We follow.